Introduction to Classical Tibetan, Lesson 8.1. Approaching a Tibetan Sentence. Now that we've gotten through all of the basics of grammar, we're going to start focusing on translation. Tibetan sentences can often be rather long and can sometimes be confusing. Remember though, if you can break a sentence up into smaller chunks and identify the ways that those smaller chunks relate to each other, you can piece them together to form a long sentence. The first step is to look at the final verb all the way at the end of the sentence. Remember that this will tell you what the general structure of the sentence will be, as well as what types of particles to be on the lookout for. Remember, if the final verb is a linking verb, yin or min, its general structure is subject-predicate yin, or subject-predicate min, meaning the subject is or is not the predicate. If the final verb is an existential verb, je, me, or tu, then the general structure is subject je, meaning subject exists. If the verb is transitive, then the general structure is agent, marked by the instrumental particle, object, verb, which means the agent does the object. And if the verb is intransitive, then the general structure is subject-verb, meaning the subject verbs. So if you have a transitive verb, look out for an agentive particle. If you have other types of verbs, look to see if you can see an emphatic particle or a continuative particle that might mark the subject. Remember that each of these elements in these basic sentence structures can be expanded into nominal groups rather than single words. And remember that while the main verb is usually in its root form, verbs in relative clauses can occur in their infinitive forms. Once you have all of the verbs sorted out, look for the building blocks of the sentence. See if you can find the subject, agent, predicate, object, or other main building blocks. From there, look at every particle and make sure that you can identify the function of each particle. How does it connect the words or nominal groups on either side? This is usually the most difficult part of approaching a Tibetan sentence. Once you've got all of that sorted out, then go ahead and translate the sentence. Finally, if several sentences are connected to each other, then translate them individually first. Then determine how they're joined together based on the verbal uses of particles that we've just covered in the last few lessons. This following example comes from the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, a famous text by the scholar Gampopa in the 12th century. This is what Gampopa has to say about patience. Sopalat yena sumte. Shin nupa chepala jimi nyampe zopatang, dunge dang du lembe zopatang, chulange par sempala mope zopao. Right away, we can see that although this appears to be 4 separate sentences, this is actually one long sentence with each main idea separated by a she. We know this because the first phrase ends with te, a continuative particle, and the next two end with tang. Remembering that the continuative particle usually indicates the subject, let's just have a look and see what's in this first phrase. Zupalaye nasumte. And sure enough, this is the subject. So moving from the left of te, we see sum, 3. 3 what? We have a na immediately to the left of this. What does na indicate? Well, one thing that it can show is a conditional, meaning if. So to the left of that, we see ye, meaning divide. So yena means if one divides. If one divides what? Supa, patience. So we can say, if one divides patience, there are 3, meaning 3 divisions or 3 types of patience. And if we look at the end of the next 3 sentences, look at what we find. Supa tang, and supao. So we know that those are the 3 types of patience. There's no verb at the end of any of these phrases, so we can infer the verb yin at the end of everything. Understanding this longer group of phrases to say something like, if one divides patience, there are 3 types. They are, this is where we infer yin at the end. This type of patience, this type of patience, and this type of patience. So let's take a look at this first type of patience. Shen nupa chepa la, jimi nyampe supa. So starting all the way at the right, we see zupa joined to something before it with a connective particle. So it's patience, which is something. Patience, which is what? We have a nominalized form of the verb minyam, meaning not thinking or not considering. Moving to the left, we see the particle g, which, like the particle chi, can mean what or how, but in this case means something like whatever or at all. So looking just at this part, we have patience, which is not thinking or not considering at all. It might sound better in English to say patience, which doesn't even consider. Then we have a ladin. In order to figure out what the ladin particle is doing, that is, how it's connecting the nominal groups on either side of it, we need to see what's on the other side. So we have shenuba chepa. There's chepa, and immediately to the left of that we have nupa, a nominalized verb meaning harm or harming. Keeping in mind the various uses of chepa when attached to a verb, we can conclude that nuba chepa means the same thing, harming. Immediately to the left of that we have shin, which means other. There's no particle between shin and nuba chepa, but remember, we've learned that the connector particle is frequently omitted in classical Tibetan. So if we infer a connective particle here, we can read this whole nominal group as harming others. So now we have harming others and patience which does not even consider, marked by a ladin particle. Keeping in mind all of the various uses of the ladin particle, we can combine these two phrases by saying patience which doesn't even consider harming others. Then we have dang, showing us that there's more to come in this list of three. So let's look at this second type of patience. Dunge dang du lempe supa. Again, we have supa connected to that which comes before it with a connective particle. So again, we can say patience, which is something. The nominalized verb to the left of that is lempa, meaning to take. Next, we see dangdu. There are some constructions in Tibetan that are not translated literally. Dangdu lempa is one of those. You just have to learn these constructions over time, and you will become more familiar with them with practice. Here, the construction something dangdu lempa means to voluntarily take on something. So looking to the left, what's the something? Dunga, suffering. So dunga dangdu lempa means voluntarily taking on suffering. When we connect it with zupa with a connective particle, then the whole phrase reads, patience which voluntarily takes on suffering. So that's the second type of patience. Now for the third. Chulangepar sempa la mupe supa. Again, we have a connector particle plus supa, meaning patience which is something. Looking immediately to the left, we have mupa, meaning faith or devotion, then a la particle, connecting mupa to sempa, thinking. Another ladin, ngepa, certainty, yet another ladin, and then ch, dharma. Now we have to figure out how all of the ladin particles connect all of these things together. If we look at ngepar sempa, we can think of the ladin here as turning ngepa, certainty, into an adverb, certainly. So literally, ngepar sempa means thinking certainly. In English, it maybe sounds better to translate this as something like ascertaining. So we have faith in ascertaining. Faith in ascertaining what? Well, next we see ch with the ladin particle. So faith in ascertaining the Dharma. Altogether, this is patience which has faith in ascertaining the Dharma. So now we have all of these smaller phrases translated. At this point, we can read the whole string of sentences together. If one divides patience, there are three types. They are patience which doesn't even consider harming others, patience which voluntarily takes on suffering, and patience which has faith in ascertaining the Dharma. Remember, if you break up a long sentence into smaller parts, it's easier to understand. In general, when you're looking at a longer sentence, start with the final verb, identify the building blocks of the sentence. Once you've done that, find all of the particles and identify their usage. and then translate shorter sentences individually before combining them all together.